and welcome back to Washington Commanders Insider. Today we are looking at this most recent update around Davante Adams. We're also going to be looking at draft prospects for the Washington Commanders. Wanted to revisit the cornerback position. And so talking about first the update here that we have via possible free agency and maybe a direction the Washington Commanders might have been willing to go in, still might actually go in that direction. But this is around wide receiver Davante Adams. And so I guess there is a new report here. I guess it's via ESPN Insider that is saying that if Davante Adams is released by the Jets, then he would prefer maybe to go to a West Coast team. So you're thinking Chargers, Rams, maybe the 49ers, those teams would be in play. And certainly that would take the Washington Commanders out of that. So, look, I don't think that that is a huge issue, especially with maybe some of the history there with Davante Adams and the Washington franchise. But I would say this. I think that, if this were the case and the Washington Commanders just didn't make a play for Davante Adams and, he sold on going out west, I don't think that that is going to really hurt what the Washington Commanders could really do in free agency. I think that there's still a real possibility that maybe they could get a player like Chris Godwin. I think that he might still be available if he doesn't go back to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. If it doesn't turn into too much of a bidding situation with T. Higgins, which I think it probably is, maybe they're in play for that. And then, if you're looking at maybe players that maybe the Washington Commanders might get via trade, you could still go out there and get Deebo Samuel. He's a player that maybe would be available for the Washington Commanders. I think it would be something where you're not going to have to give up a whole bunch of draft capital for him. And I think it would be the same thing for Cooper Kupp as well. I think that Cooper Kupp, you're probably not going to give up a whole bunch of draft capital for him at this point in time. I just think that if you're looking to get some veterans that have been established in the league via trade, those are a couple players. And then, as far as, other players that you might be able to take a look at via free agency, there's still Amari Cooper out there. You could still maybe take a chance here with Darius Slayton, who was with the Giants. I think he's set to be a free agent. I've talked about Keenan Allen and I've talked about DeAndre Hopkins. And so even if the Washington Commanders don't necessarily upgrade there via free agency and via trade, I think that there's still opportunity in the draft as well. And so, this is looking at some of the wide receivers that we have talked about and some of the ones that I definitely feel good about. And so, Trey Harris, we talked about him. I think he's a mix of an A.J. Brown and a DK Metcalf. I think he certainly is a player that maybe fits for the Washington Commanders. Also, another player too that, I definitely wouldn't mind the Washington Commanders getting is Matthew Golden, man. And I love Matthew Golden because he's a player that I feel like he can just take the lid off of a defense, and he's the one that could probably take it to the house. And so I do love that big play ability from Matthew Golden. And so I think that he would be great with Terry McLaurin if the Washington Commanders went ahead and drafted him. I still like Luther Burden III there from Missouri. I think that he is a terrific player. Reminds me a lot of Zay Flowers. And so, again, I think that he's a terrific player that maybe you go with. And so, those are just some options if the Washington Commanders decide to upgrade via the draft. And so next, I wanted to talk a little bit more about draft prospects and looking at the cornerback position. So I know yesterday we left off, we were talking about maybe Fuller would maybe come back to the Washington Commanders. I think that is something that maybe the Washington Commanders would certainly think about. And also, too, DJ Reed. I think that there is a real possibility that maybe DJ Reed could come over to the Commanders, especially since I think Adam Peters was responsible for getting him drafted to the 49ers there. And so definitely like what he can bring as a corner. But one of the intriguing, I should say, corners that, this is the first time really I've seen this. This was on Pro Football Focus, their website. And they were just doing a mock draft, and they're suggesting that maybe the Washington Commanders would take a cornerback here out of Texas. Jahdae Barron. And so, look, I liked him. Looking at his tape here, he's 5'11", 200 pounds. He is a senior. But what I love most about him when you turn on his tape is he's a physical corner, very physical. So he's a big nickel back is what they call him here, just looking at NFL.com and his draft profile here. And so, look, he is one of the bigger corners. He's definitely physical. He will come up and definitely tackle in the run game. So I do love that about him. Some of the things that they say that, he definitely has as well is that, he has very good instincts. And I think that that is clear when you look at his tape. I think that there were a lot of times where his instincts really jumps off the page because it seems like he was in the offense's playbook because he's able to jump out there and pick off the pass. And so I love that about him. But then there's the things that obviously he would need to get better at. And so in talking about the tackling, one of the things that they say is that probably needs a little bit more work with his tackling mechanics. And so I don't think that that's a huge deal, especially if he's willing to come up and be physical. And then they say another thing, too, that, is maybe a little bit of a weakness here right now is he gets a little grabby there at the top of the routes. And so we know that can definitely lead to some penalties. And so we do not want to see that. So hopefully that is something that would not be a big deal at the next level, something that he can definitely fix. And then, when they're looking at the top end speed. So that is one of the things that they say he struggles with as well. Just doesn't have maybe that recovery speed that you would like. And then also, too, he hasn't really been exposed too much to a lot of man coverage. And so that would be interesting, too, because I think that, the Washington Commanders, with the scheme and everything like that, I think at times you're going to have to be able to play some good man coverage. And in fact, I hope that, whatever way we go as far as the secondary, we do find some players that absolutely are up for the challenge of really locking down a side of the field. I think that that is an added bonus, especially if you understand the concepts and zones and things like that. But when you're talking about being able to go one-on-one with elite wide receivers, I think that allows, our defensive coordinator now to call those blitzes and be okay with the fact that he knows that he's going to have the time for, the people up front, our linebackers and everything to get home because the back end coverage is very good. And so that is something that I think is a must. And another thing, too, that I'll leave off with a positive with him is that he is very good, I think, as far as being like a ball hawk. In fact, he reminds me a little bit of Ed Reed, if I could do a comparison here. And so one of the things that they compare him to at NFL.com as far as the players here, a player that just came out of Georgia, I believe, Taki Smith, who plays for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He was a first-year player, 5'10", 202. Had a solid year. He had 2 INTs. He had 7, pass deflections. I also had some forced fumbles as well. He had 3. And so very good as far as coming up and, dislodging the football. And so that's always a good thing. If we can get a player in our secondary that can create, some havoc as far as getting turnovers, that absolutely would go a long way for this defense, because we know that, if this offense continues to keep trending up, if you can get good field position now, you get our offense back on the field, we're able to flip it that way, I think that that's going to lead to more points. That's also going to make it tougher for opposing teams to really answer that now, because we're putting up points like that on short field. So anyway, let me know in the comments what you're thinking here, about, this recent prospect that has been linked to the Washington Commanders here, because I do think that Jahdae Barron is a very solid pick here. I know that, obviously a lot of these players are going to have to come out, work on the weaknesses, but there's not any weaknesses that I'd say that I don't know if I wouldn't want him. I think that if he gets into our system, I think he could become a very productive player. So anyway, let me know with that and this Davante Adams news as well. And as I always say, go Commanders, and I will see you in the next one. All right, peace.